Hey guys, I'm Sam. Welcome to MTG Bazaar. Today I've got 3 new standard brews for you for Final Fantasy Constructed, and later in the week we're going to be battling them against another co-creator who's doing their own video, Dylan Brown. So make sure you hit the subscribe, like the video, and stay tuned for those updates. But without any further ado, let's get into the brews. The first deck we have for you today is a green, black, red Landfall Aggro deck featuring Chocobos, which I'm sure you've heard of. So why don't we have a look at that? So here we have it. We have the green, black, red, Jund colors essentially, but really only splashing the red here for the Landfall Aggro deck. Now, some of this package you will recognize from a season ago standard, and then a bunch of these cards are new as well. So kicking us off, we have great cards like we have Saz's Chocobo, which is essentially, it's a 1 cost 0/1. When a land enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. We've got a bunch of landfall trigger lands, so escape tunnels, some evolving wilds, and some fabled passages, all to trigger landfall multiple times on this. This card starts out small, but it can get quite big in this deck, so just keep an eye on the synergies there. We're pairing that up with Iridescent Vine Lasher on 1 and/or 3. A card that's been good ever since it was printed into Standard, but a card that's not really found a home in a while. So a card that I hope will, find some synergy with all these other cards that have come into the format. We've got Tifa on 2 here, if I can get it. There we are. So whenever a land you control enters, double Tifa Lockhart's power until end of turn. Meaningfully, this starts with Trample. It doesn't get that big unless you can get a really big turn off, but we do have a couple of ways of going about that in the deck, which we'll talk about later. The other new card is Ride the Shoepuff. It has landfall whenever a land you control enters, put a +1/+ counter on target creature you control. It is an enchantment. I didn't want to play more than 2 of these, particularly because it's in some ways just a worse bristly bill, but at the same time, not being able to remove it's very important, and I think that is a nice piece of synergy here. The other new card is Traveling Chocobo. So this allows you to play birds and lands off the top of your library, and if a land entering would trigger ability of a bird, or a bird entering would trigger ability as well, then that ability triggers an additional time. So essentially it just doubles up your landfall triggers when it comes to things like, I don't know, basically all of it, really. So that's a good one as well. Now, the package that we've taken from previous decks in the past are Aftermath Analyst, Nissa Resurgent Animus, Lumra, and World Soul's Rage. And this is our way of really popping off with the deck. So we're trying to get a bunch of lands into the graveyard while we're doing our normal sort of aggro game plan. And then we're trying to return a bunch of them all at once with either an Aftermath Analyst, a Lumra, or a World Soul's Rage. Nissa, as only a 2-up here, is only really in the deck to make a little bit of mana, but also to find the Analyst and the Lumra. So if you're getting into a mid-range sort of board stally sort of state, which I think is actually fairly likely for a deck like this, it does need to be in play for a few turns to start doing its thing, then you've got this over-the-top way of triggering things. Meaningfully as well, when you do have a turn like that, Tifa becomes really sick. So it starts at 1 power, 1 landfall goes to 2, then to 4, then to 8, then to 16, then to 32. And that's 5 landfall triggers away. So if you can get 5 landfall triggers in a turn, this is immediately a lethal threat by itself, almost through any number of blockers, as long as they don't have first strike. And that's a great way to kill. I'm really excited to play this one in actual games. We'll see if the sort of bad fetches, the Evolving Wild Escape Tunnel sort of stuff is not amazing, but we do have a great number of basic lands to go find off them and some synergy for when they're already in the bin as well. So I'm excited to play this and really get a look at how good it goes in practical gameplay. Just touching on the sideboard for a second, I've done a bit of a Sam classic here where I've really doubled down on a couple of these anti-enchantment and sometimes artifact things. So 2 Scrap Shooter, 2 Paw Patch Formation there, just to remove things like Temporary Lockdown, maybe get rid of a big flyer off a Paw Patch Formation. We got 1 copy of Dreams of Steel and Oil, just to, come in against the decks where sniping something like a Cutter could be really good. Ghost Vacuum for What Ails You. And 2 cut downs and 3 Choking Miasma for anti-aggro. I can see decks like this getting aggroed out a little bit quickly. A lot of the things we want to do, like with World Soul's Rage and Lumra and even Aftermath Analyst, requires a reasonably long game plan. So what we would like to do is just try and not lose those decks early and then take over the board in the mid to late game. And hopefully those cards are enough to bridge that gap. Anyway, that's our first deck for this Final Fantasy Brewfest. And Hope you like it. Let's get on to the next. The second deck we have for you today is a take on Cloud and a card that I'm sure you're all aware of, Corey Steel Cutter. Now, this is probably the most competitive of the brews, but let's have a look and see if we can make it work. This is our Cloud/Corey Steel Cutter deck. Now, this is a deck list I'm sure that a lot of people will try different versions of. It's not exactly an innovative thing for me to realize that something that goes against Corey Steel Cutter is very good. But again, we are based around Cloud. One of the real difficult things about this card is it does have a white mana cost. So it does put some pressure on the mana base. It means that you have to do stuff like either play 3 colors like we're doing here or go back down to just white and red. And I imagine that we will see a successful version of this deck at some point, no matter how hard it is to make it work, because it is pretty sweet. So one of the things that I'd like to talk about with this deck is a starting town as a new land for the format. It enters tapped unless it's your first, second, or third turn of the game, and you can pay 1 life to add 1 mana of any color, and meaningfully, it can add a colorless as well without paying the life. So this does increase our tri-color, mana sources quite quickly, and something for a deck like this which is really necessary. We've gone for the Storm Chasers, Sleight of Hand Opt, and this town package here, along with some stock ups. Who doesn't like stock up? The reason for this is that I think that you need a certain amount of instants and sorceries in the deck just to trigger Corey Steel Cutter enough. I'm a little worried about being a little short if we're just on white and red, but the future will tell us what the answer was there. So not sure at this point, but hopefully I've got it right. Okay, the other thing we have is we have the other parts of the bounce package. So Nurturing Pixie and Sunpearl Kirin, very free to play once you've got a cloud in the deck. You got your clouds in the deck anyway, just good cards. Sheltered by Ghosts as pretty impactful removal. It's probably not the best generic removal because it can be removed, but and they can get their guy back. But I think in a deck like this, where you're really short on slots, something like this, which can really tilt a board state, is probably more important than something that's a little bit more reliable. The other pieces of the removal package are actually equipment. So Chainsaw enters, it deals 3 damage to 1 target creature. Obviously, we can search this up with Cloud, so not a bad one there. And then Assimilation Aegis, if that is the right to pronounce that word. This is essentially an Oblivion Ring that is also an equipment. So another thing that we can get off Cloud, we can get some value from, Nurturing Pixieing our clouds and playing a bit more of a mid-range game state when we're looking for a little bit more gas to go off with a Corey Steel Cutter, and hopefully something that's very effective in this deck. As we know, this sort of archetype has been pretty dominant at the moment. 3 colors is a little tough, but I'm hoping the starting town will help us enough, and let's see how it goes against Dylan's Brews. Just for the sideboard here, it's all pretty normal. So High Noons, No More Lies, Sheltered by Ghosts, Spell Pierce, Filbury Silex, and Ghost Vacuum, all pretty normal things. Destroy Evil is a card that's getting a little less play at the moment, but a card that I really like, and I think a card that should probably be getting a reasonable amount of play, no matter what the changes in the format are. But we'll just have to see. We can go more or less on that. Dragonwing Glider is the other interesting one. This is just a somewhat resilient threat that you can also just find off a cloud. You could theoretically main deck this card, but my feeling was that you wanted to stay lower on the curve than a 5-drop. And having access to this is mostly important for decks like Control, and that's where I'd like to see it played. All right, that's the Cloud Corey Steel Cutter deck list, and let's get you to the last and funnest brew. And I've kept the best for last for you guys here. So the last deck we have is the sweetest amongst the brews, and what we're trying to do is get an additional combat step 2 different ways. So Beltier and Fran, red-green, vehicle aggro. Let's go. Here's our last and I think most fun brew. So essentially I've taken my Delirium deck and I've messed it up with vehicles, and we're going to look at this card, Beltier and Fran. If we can actually click it, there we go. So it's a 3 mana 4/3 with reach, and then vehicles you control get +1/+1, have vigilance and reach. Whenever a vehicle crewed by Beltier and Fran this turn attacks, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, you may pay 1 green and red. If you do after this phase, there is an additional combat phase. So meaningfully, this is limited to 1, but we still are playing our Fear of Missing Outs to go along with it. And hopefully we can get a bunch of combat steps, although it does require us to play vehicles. Now, some of the vehicles in Standard are quite good at the moment, and I'm hopefully playing the best ones in the color. One of them is Rocketeer Boost Buggy, red-green 3/2. When it attacks, you make a treasure token. Very useful for deploying your hand. And then it's also got Exhaust. This vehicle becomes an artifact creature. Note that that is not until end of turn, so it just becomes a 4/3 because you put a +1/+1 counter on it as well. So if you don't have a guy to crew this, that's totally fine. You can just pay the mana. It has only got crew 1, so every other creature in the deck can crew it, and hopefully that's not going to be too much of a constraint. The other one, which I'm only playing 3 of at the moment, it might go back up to 4. It's been hard to get the 3 drops in, despite the fact we're playing Landfall Elves. Just having too many of them is pretty tough, but this card's really, really strong, so maybe we could see playing a few more of them. So it's a 2 and a red, 4/2 trample haste vehicle. When it enters, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn, so that means that you don't have to crew it that first turn you play. It's just a ball lightning or similar. It has crew 2, and then it has 2 and red, discard a card. Return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. So even if this gets killed the first time, you can bring it back. It will be a creature until end of turn no matter what. Obviously, it'll get exiled after that, but theoretically, we've done the job by then, and it's not too much of a problem. The other source of vehicles in the deck is Chandra Spark Hunter, and she's also a great source of crewing vehicles, so hopefully there's some synergy there, along with all the natural synergy with the Delirium elements of this deck. So when we're looking at this deck, we're really trying to go either 1, 2, 3, or we're going to, Landfall Elves on 1, skip all the way to 3, and then hopefully get something down relatively quickly. We're sort of set up to be able to use our mana relatively effectively every turn. So what we would like to see out of this deck is an aggro turn where we got some mana left after we've deployed all our threats, so we can pay for something like Beltier Fran, or should we need to turn on our Rocketeer booster buggy by ourselves. So very excited for this one. It also gets access to Starting Town, so I think that the mana in this deck is actually probably pretty good. We've got 23 lands without playing too many basics. We're playing 7. And which we want some amount of, but not too many of, all in the same hand. The sideboard here is very similar to my Delirium deck. If it's not broke, don't fix it. So 2 Abrade, 3 Keen-Eye Curator, 2 Outpace Oblivion, 3 Paw Patch Formation, 2 Pyroclasm, 2 Screaming Nemesis, and 1 Soul Guide Lantern. We don't get the Keen-Eye Curator's main deck here, so instead they're in the sideboard. Some amount of problem going against some of the more graveyard synergistic decks there, but quite frequently Keen-Eye Curator died there anyway. So what you're probably going to try and do is just race them down game 1 and then find a way to interrupt them or find the initiative in game 2 and 3. Okay, those were our 3 brews for Final Fantasy Standard Constructed. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Make sure you stay attached to the channel, so subscribe, like the video. It's free, it helps, and we thank you a lot for it. But we got that future content coming for you, so make sure you watch it and let us know in the comments what your favorite brew is. Thanks very much, guys. I'm Ben Sam, and we'll see you next time.